Hello, everyone, and hello to the panelists. Excited for this conversation. I'm going to jump in with you, Tarini, because I feel like with what you've done with æquō, you've kind of flipped the narrative a little bit. When we talk about design and craft and art, and I think speaking to all of you, it's been so nice because you don't really distinctly silo these practices. We're going to talk about them almost as one because they all inform each other. But I think what you've done with your gallery is you have situated craft at the highest echelon, in the sense you told me you're not a traditional gallerist. You rep the craft of India, and artists come to collaborate with that craft. Can you tell me the story about how this came to be? Because it's a wonderful story.
So we started æquō as a COVID project. We were locked down. India was locked down, as everyone knows, pretty hard. And my mom sent us on, we were in our factory in Vijayanagar, Karnataka, and my mom, as part of CSR, sent us out into the villages just to see what we could do to help, because no information was being given to the villagers. And when we went, I stumbled upon a 10 mud home village which was doing black pottery. And we said, we had nothing to do. So we said, let's collaborate with them, let's call them, and let's do a clay workshop. And we produced some pieces, we had some fun, and then I called some of my architect friends in Bombay, and I said, would you like to buy these to put in your project? And all of them went. And I was like, we're onto something. And there's so much opportunity in this country, and there's a need to revive the craft. But we just have to do it with a contemporary lens, and that's how æquō started.
Yeah, amazing. And I feel like when we spoke earlier, we were talking about this, old idea of patronage in India, and how, in a way, you've really brought back that idea of patronage, but in a way that supports innovation and excellence. Can you tell me a bit about the things that you produce?
Yeah, so actually this idea of patronage is not new, and neither is it mine. I had the privilege of going to Rajiv Saini's foundation this morning, and he had done a similar project in the 1980s called the Golden Eye Project, where he had collaborated with global designers like Stotsas, Mario Bellini, invited them to India, and done very similar things that we do with æquō. And I was just blown. He's remarkable and the godfather of craft of India, but 40 years and the kind of research and documentation that he has, I think we all should just go and learn from him, because it's something which is beyond incredible.
Sounds amazing. And Rajiv, tell me a bit about your practice, because it's been so enjoyable talking to you, because when we talk about craft, you say, I don't think about it as something separate. It's innate to what you do. It's not some siloed practice. Can you tell me a bit about how you approach craft in a really modern way and bring it into your modern design and architectural practice?
Sure. So, when I look at, as I mentioned to you, that craft is kind of so embedded, interwoven, it's almost second nature. You don't think of introducing it as craft into the space you're creating. As an interior architect, I'm sort of interested in creating space. And when you're creating that space, you're kind of considering all the attributes that you can play with as tools. You're thinking of form, shape, color, materiality, and craft is one of them for me. And for me, oftentimes, craft comes after a material has been brought into the equation of the space, and you kind of decide. You want to do something with metal, and then I'd kind of think, okay, if it's going to be metal and not stone or not wood, what do you want that metal to be? Do you want it to be just sheet metal, or do you want it to be cast metal, or do you want repoussé? And then sort of the idea of craft. But all this is sort of subconsciously happening, as a process we apply every day in our practice. So I don't sort of bring craft as an external element to just place it into the project. It sort of just is embedded in sort of everything we do. And fortunately in India, you've got access to such good craft even today, even in sort of the big cities, that all it takes is one phone call, and you call someone and you say, oh, can you come over tomorrow to the studio, and we'd like to discuss this, and it just flows from there. Yeah.
Amazing. And Loïc, welcome to India. I know you're fresh from the Kumbh. which I'd love to ask you about. Tell me about your approach, because one thing that's very evident when you look up, your gallery is we're not interested in design, but then we spoke, and design is really everything. And I feel like you're an advocate against sort of separating art, design, and craft. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Sure. I see design as such as a problem-solving tool to be able to deliver what we human need. And design as such, we try to do it, trying to work on the functionality and the aesthetic. At Carpenters Workshop Gallery, in a way, this process of design is kind of irrelevant. So, of course, craft is important, but I see it as a tiny piece in the process to achieve the artwork that we want to do. We are interested in the story. We're interested in the emotion, looking at an object because it says something. So all the journey which leads to creating the object is relevant, but I see craft only as a tool. And it is interesting because if I might share and be very candid, very often we've been looking for some great Indian artists. And very often the focus was almost too much on the craft. And when we were brainstorming, I say, but what is the story behind this thing? What are you trying to say? It's very well made, it's beautiful, but what are you trying to say? And I believe no one needs another dining table, no one needs another chair, but we all need a beautiful story. And through the gallery, we are storytellers. So the craft is relevant, but the story is, I think, the most important thing.
So interesting. And Tarini, if I may, I feel like one of the stories that you spoke about when you're sort of reviving craft and bringing people back to craft is bringing these slight design interventions, which is what I'm hearing from you, Loïc, as well, bringing that conceptual perhaps to the craft. Can you tell me how these design interventions have been embraced by craftspeople and brought them back into the fold, and how that sort of played out for you?
My journey happened quite organically, and I think the reason why I collaborate with global artists is because, like Loïc said, the story is very important, and it's almost like a travel journey. They see things in my country that I possibly can't see because I'm from here. And I think that narrative, the East meets West, the cross-culture, the dialogue, is what keeps it really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Rajiv, can you tell me a bit about this idea of collaboration? Because one thing that you said is in your process and working with craft and craftspeople is you have to keep an open mind and be malleable, and so many interesting things can arise from just being a bit fluid.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that when you collaborate with a craftsperson or with an artist, you've got to be flexible because, and the best way is sort of by brainstorming. And we were talking about, you've sort of anecdotes, and I was telling you about, we were doing Devikar Hotel. This was 20 years ago, and there was a suite that we'd conceptualized, which was to have just these drawings of Srinathji, the local deity, as sketches, black and white sketches, and I wanted to sort of then bring a sculptural piece, a three-dimensional piece in the same room to counter these drawings. And so we were having this discussion with the artist who was going to who's going to make these sketches, and we agreed upon the 12 shingars and sort of these drawings, and he showed us references. At first, he was very surprised that you only want to have sketches and you don't want to have paintings because that's what everybody wants to have if you're in that neighborhood. We said, no, we'd like to keep this to drawings and then have this sculpture. So we agreed upon the drawings, but he was not happy. He said, you can't paint the deity and not embellish it a bit. But we said, we don't want the embellishment. He said, but you've got to have a little pika, little something somewhere on that. So we said, well, we've got these 12 drawings. Then why don't we do one thing? Let's embellish any one element on each of the drawings. So he said, all right, sure, we can do. And we spoke about it. And then, so out of those 12 drawings, one had just the earrings embellished with color. One had the eyes painted. One had like a scarf painted on the body. And it became this beautiful set of 12 sketches, which had just that hint of color. I mean, this was one example. But when you're often working with sort of more craft, I remember many years ago we were doing these bedside tables in a room which were all in enamel. Now, enamel has its limitations of size. You would know because you've done a collection with enamel. And we had a fairly big surface to cover. So again, you kind of engage in a dialogue with the craftsperson. And he says, this is the maximum size I can do. We can't do any more than, bigger than this. Then instead of sort of breaking it up in the middle, you kind of, I said, all right, let's just do a grid of these little things. And you took that grid and then developed that into a pattern. So the whole sort of skin of that piece became, a grid sort of smaller enamel pieces, which became a design in itself. So design emerges, from these conversations that you have with the craftspeople.
Absolutely. And I guess in a way, the prevalence of the hand and those sort of organic journeys, that is really true luxury when we talk about what luxury is. Loïc, how do you see, what are your insights in terms of the rise of South Asia as both consumers and creators of art and design? What are some of the insights from your perspective?
I don't have strong views, to be honest.
Okay.
No, I don't have strong views.
You don't have strong views? What have you seen? What have you seen?
Just, can you rephrase? Because I'm not sure I understand exactly the question.
So I guess what I'm trying to ask is from your perspective, I guess, coming in internationally, and obviously there's been this, a huge sort of rise of South Asia globally. And I'd love to understand from your perspective how you perceive that rise and any trends or any insights that you might have coming here, being a part of the fair, and from both creators and a consumer point of view.
So we need to differentiate the artistic and the commercial. So on the artistic, I started talking about it. I think there's yet a very defined American and European aesthetic, which is slightly different from what the Asian market is used to. And I've explained that we are yet, while we look at a lot of projects, we are challenged all the time with people sharing their projects. And we are yet to find what we believe is the flavor of Carpenters Workshop Gallery. That's for the artistic side, but we're looking actively. On the commercial side, it's enormous. There's been the Chinese boom, which started sort of 10, 15 years ago, which has been a little bit deceiving because dealings in China has been complicated. And then suddenly you have India, which has started some time ago, and it becoming this enormous market. And you see people with a very strong appetite, more and more cultivated about what's going on and wanting to know, learning extremely fast. So at the moment, it's almost a growth relay from us commercial gallery, where pretty much 50-60% of our business is led through America. We do need to find some new markets where we're going to be able to show some of the talents that we've been working with. And India is obviously a big market. Saudi Arabia is becoming a huge market. South Korea, of course, which has been it's been around for some time, but it's very interesting to see how India and Saudi Arabia are becoming a very strategic market for any, I would say, big galleries.
Are there any artists in particular that you're excited and looking forward to seeing while you're here?
There's a lot of artists. I haven't had the time to go extensively through the fair, but I've seen and we did share some images. There's a lot of beautiful things, but more on the sort of the contemporary art side, which is where I've found the most excitement.
Tarini, can you tell me about your model of collaboration where you bring international artists in predominantly to work with a craft modality? How have perceptions changed? Because I remember you saying that initially perhaps you were reaching out, but now you've got people reaching out to you very interested in coming here and engaging.
I think the last 4 years have kind of been transformative for India after COVID. I think we've seen from, an interior standpoint, from a real estate standpoint, from a build standpoint, that India's really like shining from an art standpoint. And for me, it's, so we're riding the wave with that transformation, and craft, like Rajiv said, for everyone here, we have it at our doorstep. We use it all the time, right? We make, like every interior architect uses craft in a very sort of nonchalant way, like in a way that they don't really think that they're using craft. So when someone from the east, west, whatever, outside India comes, they look at it with fresh, renewed eyes, and the respect that they give it is it's incredible. So it's been an amazing journey so far, and I can't wait to collaborate more and hear more stories and more journeys.
And it's so, what's also so interesting is, I think, with what you do, I mean, obviously it has such social impact, but you don't position it as a social initiative. You're positioning it as much like what Loïc is putting out. Can you talk to me about that and the fact that you're open source and the way you credit the craftsperson as well as the artist?
So India is a very ancient civilization, as everyone knows, and we've had patronage since the Maharajas, like the Mughal, the Maharajas. We're very into our own and our craft and our patronage, and for me, and a lot of it was produced in India in the 80s, 90s, and no one talks about made in India, right? Everyone says, oh, it's made in France, even though the gown was embroidered in India. And especially in the fashion industry, and I come from fashion. So I wanted to change that narrative. I didn't want to be yet another social project out of India. Yeah. I didn't want to tell that narrative. I wanted to position myself at the same level as any other global gallery. We're not at Carpenters yet. And I'm not sure we'll get there even, because that's truly blurring the lines between art and design, while we're still not doing that yet. I didn't want people to think, oh, made in India means that it's, not as good. So I was very proudly made in India and made with Indian craft.
And that really ties into, Rajiv, what we've been speaking about how it's one of the modalities that you have at your disposal in creating a compelling space. Can you talk to me about some of the projects that you've worked on and how you've brought craft into the spaces and what that process has been?
Sure. Tarini, first I must sort of congratulate you. I think your program is fantastic because you really pick a craft and then develop a whole sort of body of pieces or objects which sort of in such a contemporary interpretation. And I think that's really so vital for the survival of these crafts. If we keep going back to the traditional forms, they're not going to see the next 50 years. You've got to think of new ways of using the skill of the craftsperson and creating objects that kind of resonate with a younger audience that people can relate to. So I think you're doing an absolutely fabulous job at that. And for me, Megha, as he said, craft is one element, and I don't think of starting a space with craft. Craft just becomes one of those things you bring into a space when you want to imbue it with that special quality. And sort of if you're going through the images, I think Charlene wanted me to sort of caption them for the crafts use. And I said, it's hard to even mention that because there could be several crafts in one space. So what do I highlight here? And, whether it's metal, whether it's wood, whether it's textile, it could be a simple doodle you give at the end of a project and you just want some cushion embroidered to sort of just complete the whole picture. That's an example of craft. Or we worked with sort of traditional crafts. Bidri, for example, and I know you've done a collection of screens with Bidri. Bidri is this art of metal damascene, traditionally used for making snuff boxes or sort of for armory or small jewelry pieces. But we for a project many years ago, this is about 20 years ago, thought of using it as cladding in a powder bathroom, sort of, just black and silver with very dim lighting. So, the artisans are very surprised that you want these panels made to cover a whole room, and we said yes, we'd like to do that, and the end result was quite spectacular. They were very pleased. We did that once again in a lounge with wood marquetry. You'll see in some of the images. We were doing a project which overlooked the zoo in New Delhi, and it was really a forest out there, and we were just brainstorming. We said, how do we really bring this forest inside the room? And the client was sort of very pro-craft, and he said, let's do something with craft that sort of brings this forest in. And we considered many kind of craft techniques, and we zeroed in on this wood marquetry. And wood marquetry traditionally in India is done, there was the Petigari technique in Gujarat, and then it's traditionally done in the south, in Mysore. we approached these guys in Mysore and we said, we don't want to do your traditional decorative panels, but we really want a rendition of these forests indoors. So they said, fine, do you have an example, what you'd like? So we made these drawings of just the mango trees that we could see outside the window, full one scale, 1:1 model, and sort of sent it to them. And then the entire room was enveloped in that wood marquetry, the walls, the ceiling. So these were just examples of taking craft, which has been around for centuries, but applying it to a modern space, or changing the scale of the craft to make it more exciting.
Yeah, and that looked incredible. Actually, seeing an image of that, which I urge everyone to look up, was really so beautiful. Talking about modern spaces, Loïc, can you tell me about Ladbroke Hall and what you've conceived there? It sounds like such an interesting concept.
Thank you for asking, because this has been one of pretty much the highlight of my past 4 years. Carpenters Workshop, we have 4 different galleries. We're in London, Paris, New York, and Los Angeles. And I felt that after COVID, the gallery market was changing, and collectors were looking for something slightly different. And also, probably what we call midlife crisis, the constant transactional approach of being a gallerist and talking to collectors and always being the one sending an email and trying to sell something has its limit. And I wanted to be able to look at the model in a different way. So we decided in London to move away from Mayfair, and we found this remarkable space in Notting Hill. And the idea was to try to look at a space where we could, within one location, try to celebrate any form of artistic expression. Design and collectible art being one of them, but food, wine, dance, poetry, jazz, classical music, and a little bit like you guys are doing, say, there's some dying forms of art. Poetry, for instance, is a dying form of art. And I wanted to look at how, within the same place, we could have this emotion. And therefore, the journey of a collector or a visitor coming to the premises could be a 360 experience. It was a challenge because it's sort of, people like to be all concentrated at the same place. So moving in London, people from Mayfair to Notting Hill was a bit of a challenge. And as a matter of fact, the footfall is quite spectacular. And I think you would find the experience quite stimulating, because I believe we managed to create something truly unique, and people are happy there. And I think it's a big achievement.
It sounds incredible. Definitely a must-see if you're in London. I'd like to sort of wrap up by, you've all kind of managed to have these incredible creative careers and built these creative practices. I'd love to just ask each and, all of you, what you think it takes to build a successful and fulfilling and long creative practice, looking at everything, because I feel like you all do something so powerfully where you just kind of, you don't look at one thing in a silo, you kind of bring so many elements into what you do. So I'd love to get some insights from you on that.
Okay, I think it takes a lot of resilience. It takes a very patient wife as well, because you're not there very often, and the family ecosystem needs to be very patient. But I think it's and when it comes to Carpenters Workshop, and when we started 20 years ago, we needed to have a clear focus, and we needed a clear story. And I use this word very often, the idea of a story. And when you come to our ecosystem, there's a flavor. You might like it, or you might not like it, but from each ecosystem, in each gallery you're going to come, I believe you're going to recognize the flavor. And I think in our industry, in creative industry, you have to be extremely focused. So you are identified to a specific flavor. And I think this is the key to success as a gallerist, to be extremely focused in your conviction and knowing where you want to go, and especially knowing where you absolutely don't want to go.
Definitely. And your journey was you didn't start out where you are now. It sort of evolved and you became more focused, right? Can you tell me a bit about that journey?
I started with my business partner, Julien Lombraille. We started, the two of us. Now we are a team of 150 people. And no, we started because we wanted to, at the beginning, in a way, naively, we thought we could show art, we could show design, we could show sculpture. And you can't be a jack of all trades, and you need to be specialized. And precisely, if you want to fine-tune this flavor, you need to be very, very focused. And then we looked at this concept of collectible design, and we wanted to almost deconstruct this concept of design, focusing precisely on the form more than the functionality.
Fascinating.
You know my background, Megha. I'm a computer scientist by training, and so it was real passion and a chance encounter. But I think the secret is really to just pursue what you love with all your heart and be sort of committed to it. And that's what I've done all these years. Never really looked at the bottom lines or whatever. Just did what I know and what I enjoy doing.
But I also loved when we were talking about, when you said I'm a computer scientist, I was like, okay, well how, and when we were talking about building a creative practice, one of the things we spoke about is the fact that you have many different interests.
Absolutely.
You're not focused in on one thing. You let so many things inform what you do.
That, of course, it's just a sort of interest in aesthetics and sort of, cross-pollination is always good. You kind of, different practices inform each other, and I think.
So you don't have to stick to the curriculum.
Absolutely not, I think, yeah.
And Tarini, I'd love your insights on how to build a creative practice these days.
I think for me, my word would be open. I hear a lot, I absorb a lot, I learn from, people who worked 20 years and created incredible galleries, brands, projects. I learn from all sorts of people from all sorts of industries. And just to keep an open mind and like being an absorbent sponge, and obviously passion, because without passion you can't really follow your journey. But I've learned from fashion, I've learned from architecture, it's all creativity is in everything, right? It's just what you see, really. So
absolutely. And can you tell me a bit also about, because you were talking about how you're looking to the future in terms of refining the story of craft and some of the exciting collaborations that you have coming up, cross collaborations. I'd love to just hear a bit more about that.
We have a few new young designers in the pipeline, and we're trying to also explore new crafts. I really want to explore the region of Kashmir. Because that's always been, a troubled area in India, and I think they really need to bring their creativity back. It was the start of the Silk Route. It was our doors to the world back in the day. So we're really interested in the crafts of Kashmir and to see how we can work with that. So we're really excited.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. I know I learned a lot, and I think we might be handing over to some questions, Charlene, wherever she is. Please join me in thanking our panelists.